Welcome to the Middle School Cafe podcast, where we're serving up fresh strategies and solutions for ELA teachers just like you. Join us as we explore proven methods to bridge the achievement gap and help every student reach their full potential. Whether you're a veteran teacher or just starting out, grab a cup of coffee and a notepad and let's get started. Here's your host, Carolyn Wall.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Middle School Cafe podcast. I hope your week is off to a great start. I'm so excited that it is finally March. The big thaw is on its way. I can't really complain too much, as this year, here in the Northwest, we didn't get any snow down to the valley floor, but it has been cold. After living in Arizona for 10 years and moving home, I'm not a fan of temperatures below 60 degrees. For those of you in the Midwest and out east, I know you've had more than your fair share of snow this year, and I'm sure you are probably more excited than I am that spring is almost here. March always feels like that stretch of the year when routines are solid, students are comfortable, and we have a chance to nudge student thinking just a little further. Today, I want to spend some time talking about something that sounds very instructional on the surface, helping students read like writers, but underneath that, this is really about depth. It's about what happens after students can tell us what happened in the chapter. It's about how we move conversations forward once they've mastered retelling of the plot. Because if we're honest, most of our students can summarize. They can tell us the events of the story. They can identify the conflict. And when we ask what they thought, we often hear the same types of responses. I liked it. It was boring. It was sad. And sometimes we push them a little further, but the conversation tends to stall. Not because they didn't read, but because they are reading for events rather than decisions. When I talk about reading like a writer, I'm not talking about adding a separate unit or layering on more terminology. I'm talking about helping students notice that what they are reading was built intentionally, that someone made choices, that the way a chapter begins, the way a sentence is structured, the way information is revealed, none of that is accidental. Reading like a writer means shifting from asking what happened to asking how did the author make that happen? That one shift opens up so much more thinking. Middle school is such an important time for this work because our expectations for writing increase significantly during these years. We want students organizing ideas clearly, using evidence intentionally, building stronger introductions, paying attention to tone and structure. But strong writing doesn't grow in isolation. It grows out of close reading. Students can't write what they haven't seen. If they only read for plot, they tend to write for completion. If they only answer surface-level questions, they tend to produce surface-level writing. But when they begin to notice structure, pacing, repetition, word choice, and point of view as deliberate decisions, they start to mimic those patterns in their own writing. And that doesn't require a new program. It requires different conversations around the texts we're already using. Now, part of what makes this challenging is pacing. We feel pressure to move on. We have curriculum maps, we have units to get through, and often the questions provided focus primarily on comprehension of events. Those questions are important. Comprehension is foundational. But if we stop there, students never move beyond that first layer. And the truth is, much of our curriculum emphasizes comprehension because that's what students are tested on. They need to identify the main idea. They need to cite evidence. They need to analyze what the text says explicitly and implicitly. Those skills are important. They're necessary. But if we really want students to become thinkers, and ultimately lifelong readers, we have to move beyond simply understanding what a text says. We have to help them consider how a text works. Because strong readers don't just absorb information, they notice structure, they question choices, they pay attention to how meaning is shaped. And when we only focus on comprehension, we're teaching students to consume text. When we move into reading like a writer, we're teaching them to examine it. That's a very different level of engagement. Another challenge is that authors' craft can start to feel big and formal. It can feel like something that requires a mini lesson, notes, anchor charts, maybe even an assessment. And because of that, we sometimes save it for specific moments instead of weaving it into everyday reading. But reading like a writer is less about formal analysis and more about awareness. It can start very simply. For example, instead of asking, "What happened at the end of the chapter?" we might ask, "Why do you think the author ended the chapter there?" That small change reminds students that someone constructed the ending. Instead of asking, "How did the character feel?" we can ask, "How did the author show that feeling?" Now students have to look at the language, the structure, the details. Even narrowing our focus to one lens at a time can make this work feel manageable. Maybe one week you simply pay attention to introductions. How do chapters open? With dialogue, with action, with reflection. During read alouds, you pause briefly and say, "Notice how this chapter starts in the middle of the action. Why might the author choose that instead of setting the scene first?" Another week, you might focus on pacing. When do sentences get shorter? When does description slow things down? What effect does that create for the reader? Over time, those moments build on one another. Students begin to notice patterns without prompting, and if they can notice them, they will start to show up in their conversations and in their writing. This is also why I think it is so powerful when students hear authors talk about their own decisions. When students hear a writer explain why they structured a scene a certain way or why they chose to leave something unsaid, it reinforces the idea that writing is intentional. It removes the mystery. Writing stops feeling like something that just happens and starts feeling like something built step by step. That idea is actually what led me to create the Voices in Lit podcast series. I wanted students to hear authors talk about their craft in a way that felt accessible and grounded. In each episode, students listen to a research based interview with a classic author such as O. Henry or Mark Twain and hear them explain how and why they use specific literary devices. Instead of teaching things like symbolism or tone in isolation, students hear the purpose behind choices. And what I've noticed is that when students hear an author explain their thinking, it gives them language, it gives them a framework. They begin to connect literary devices to meaning rather than just identifying them because a worksheet asked them to. The Voices in Lit episodes are structured so students actively listen, take notes, and then apply what they've learned in their own writing. They're simple to use, just audio, no special platforms, and they can fit into whole class instruction, stations, subplans, or even independent work. But more than anything, they support this exact shift we're talking about, moving from consuming a text to examining how it was built. I'll add a few links in the show notes if you want to check out the series. Whether you use that resource or simply build more conversations like it into your classroom, the goal is the same. We want students to understand that writers make decisions, and those decisions shape how readers experience a text. And once students begin to see those decisions clearly, their role as readers starts to shift. They're no longer just following events, they're paying attention to how those events are arranged. They begin looking for the building process as they read. They start asking themselves why information is revealed in a certain order, why a particular word is repeated, why dialogue appears in one moment and description in another. That awareness transfers directly into their own writing. If we want students to write stronger introductions, they need to see strong introductions in action. If we want them to build tension, they need to feel how pacing creates tension. If we want clearer organization, they need to recognize organizational patterns as they read. This doesn't require long literary analysis essays. It doesn't require a separate writing packet. It requires consistency. One intentional question each week, one brief pause during reading to name a decision, one conference question that moves beyond summary and into construction. For example, in independent reading conferences, we might begin with summary, because that still matters, but then gently move forward. After a student tells you what happened, you might ask, was there anything the author did that made that moment stand out? Or even, if you were writing that scene, would you structure it the same way? Those questions invite transfer, they invite ownership. And that is where reading and writing start to connect in a meaningful way. If you're hearing a lot of "it was fine" responses in your classroom, it may not be disengagement. It may be that students haven't yet been taught how to notice. Reading like a writer gives them a framework for noticing. It raises the level of thinking in the room because they are paying closer attention. It strengthens discussion because they have more language to work with. And it strengthens writing because they begin to see themselves as decision makers too. Reading like a writer is not about adding more. It is about looking more closely at what is already in front of us. And over time, those small shifts create stronger readers and stronger writers without overwhelming either you or your students. As always, thank you for spending a few minutes with me today. I know your time is valuable, and I don't take it lightly that you chose to listen in. If you know a teacher bestie that would enjoy the podcast, please feel free to share this episode with them. If you're interested in exploring the Voices in Lit podcast series and hearing how those author conversations might fit into your classroom, you can head to the show notes. I'll include links there so you can take a look and see if it's something that would support your students. And if you're looking for ongoing support and real conversation around what's happening in your classroom, I'd love to invite you to join the free Building Strong and Confident Readers community. Inside the community, we have weekly Q&A sessions where you can bring questions about lesson structure, engagement, conferences, book choice, whatever you're working through. And we also host monthly trainings. This month, our training is focused entirely on book clubs, how to structure them, how to keep students accountable, and how to make them meaningful without adding a huge amount of prep. I hope you'll join us for that. The links for the community and the upcoming training will also be in the show notes. Thanks again for being here, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for joining me today. As a reminder, a new episode drops every first and third Tuesday, so be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Be sure to visit middleschoolcafe.com to find links to everything mentioned in today's show. Until next time.